The moment you can't be controlled is the moment you become a problem. That sentence alone explains why this topic exists and why it makes certain people deeply uncomfortable. Because what was uncovered about you wasn't loud, dramatic, or supernatural. It was far more unsettling than that. It was verifiable. Patterns don't lie, behavior doesn't lie. And when someone consistently doesn't react the way the system expects, alarms start ringing quietly in places you'll never see. Here's a fact most people never talk about. Studies in behavioral psychology show that groups become anxious, not when someone rebels, but when someone cannot be predicted. Rebels can be managed. Predictable people can be steered. But individuals who think independently, detach emotionally, and move based on internal logic instead of social pressure, those individuals trigger instability. Not because they attack the system, but because they expose it. That's where you come in. At first, you were misread, then underestimated, then dismissed. But slowly, something didn't add up. You didn't burn out when expected. You didn't beg for approval. You didn't collapse under pressure. And most confusing of all, you didn't need an audience. That's when the shift happened. Curiosity turned into concern. Confidence turned into agitation. And what looked like calm observation on your part started feeling like silent exposure on theirs. Now let's add a tiny bit of humor before this gets too intense, because nothing rattles fragile control more than someone who's serious and unbothered. You didn't flip tables, you didn't announce your awakening, you just kept functioning better. Which, oddly enough, is far more irritating than rebellion. It's like losing a chess game to someone who never trash-talked, never celebrated, and quietly put the king in checkmate while sipping water. This isn't about ego. It's not about being special. It's about the uncomfortable truth that when someone stops needing external permission to think, move, and recover, others start losing their grip. And once that truth surfaced about you, it couldn't be unseen. That's the truth they uncovered, and that's why the composure cracked. Most people don't realize how much of their thinking isn't actually theirs. Opinions arrive prepackaged, reactions are socially approved, and fear is often borrowed from the room rather than felt internally. You operate differently. When a crowd panics, you pause. When a trend demands loyalty, you hesitate. Not because you're stubborn, but because your mind doesn't automatically download group emotion as truth. That alone sets you apart more than any label ever could. What was uncovered is that pressure doesn't stick to you the same way. Guilt, urgency, outrage, excitement, these things pass through you instead of settling in. You observe them, weigh them, and then decide. That delay is small, but it's everything. Systems depend on instant emotional compliance. Advertising, authority, social circles, even families rely on the assumption that most people will feel first and think later. You break that assumption without trying. This isn't about intelligence in the traditional sense, it's about internal independence. You don't need the room to agree before you're comfortable disagreeing. You don't rush to align just to avoid discomfort, and because of that, fear tactics fail faster on you. Once fear doesn't work, control weakens. That's when discomfort begins on the other side. People around you may not even know why they feel uneasy. They sense that you're present, but not programmable. You listen, but you're not absorbent. You participate, but you're not owned. That creates a strange tension, because group dynamics depend on emotional syncing. When one person doesn't sync, the rhythm stumbles. What really unsettles others is that you don't announce this difference. You're not dramatic about it. You don't need to prove anything. You simply don't react on cue. And over time, that reveals something most people don't want to confront. That much of their certainty is inherited, not chosen. This is why attempts to pressure you often escalate. When subtle influence fails, people try volume. When volume fails, they try urgency. When urgency fails, frustration sets in. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you're not doing what's expected. The truth is simple and uncomfortable. You are harder to steer because your inner compass isn't calibrated by the crowd. Once that became clear, it exposed how fragile group control really is. And that realization is what started to shake them.